Hello, my name is Teresita Blanco, the Artsy sister, and today we're reading Saturnastra Monkey King. This is Chapter 1, Part 1, The Return. The island of Ruidiobus, I spelled it but I can't pronounce it, was a peaceful tropical paradise. Stretching beyond it was the blue ocean. The breeze carried the smell of the stony lighthouse on top of the cliff. And it was a lighthouse in name only. It was far too inland to be of any practical use for ocean mariners, and the top cupola also did not provide any light at night. And the house was the former residence of the illustrious Monkey King. And the tower had been left abandoned for almost 4 years, and in younger times it had served as its base of operation. And with the access of their king, the monkeys and the apes had scattered to the four winds, and no clientele had been renewed, and still whenever humanoid beings posed a threat, the Monkey King's mandate of heaven was invoked. And they would come together and overwhelm their enemies with a sheer number. And the mandate of heaven is usually invoked during the summertime, and the humans tend to grow restless during that time. And the chaos of the outside world has left the tower pretty much unaffected, and this abandoned tower was rarely visited upon, and the only person who faithfully maintained it was a green-eyed bonobo ape maiden named Gargantua. A decade ago, Monkey King had tasked her with keeping his home in one piece, more or less. And Gargantua had been faithfully keeping up with her lonely task throughout all those years, and her peers had warned her of the futility of the task, and like the rest, she knew that her king was not coming back, and he loved his home far too much to bother about those he left behind. And indeed he had often spoken of other missions he had done together with his twin Ahi. In the same way that he never bothered to return to those lands, King was probably not going to return to Rudibius either. And Garganta had maintained the tower using a skill that was new to her kind, and the skill was called logic. Up to that point, the Nagas had relied on instinct to solve all of their problems. Like, the Nagas is what I call all of the monkeys and apes that acquire sentience. You know, like Planet of the Apes level of intelligence. Yeah? And up to that point, the Nagas had relied on instinct to solve all of their problems. And there eventually came a point that instinct was not enough to overcome their foes. And this is where the Monkey King came in, and he offered the Nagas knowledge and skill, and combined with their animal instinct, they became a force to be reckoned, and no longer would they be bullied by the advanced species. And just as Garganta had reasoned, she one day found all of the furniture back inside the tower, and her Monkey King was wrapped in furs facing the fire. And she also noted other strange items which did not originally belong to the tower, and the item which caught her attention was a hyper-realistic group portrait. And the portrait had 13 children with identical faces but dressed differently, and they were all scattered about the magic user's workshop, and at the center there was a red-robed wizard who was focused wholly on a magic crystal. And another item that caught her attention was a pile of gold near the fireplace, and she remembered that Ahi liked to sleep on top of gold, and the way the items were carefully placed made Garganta smile, and her instinct told her that King was going to live in the tower from now on. He had returned home. King did not seem to notice Garganta casually browsing through his personal possession, and his brow was furrowed in deep thought as he gazed into the fire. And he had picked up the habit from his sister Karina, and Karina had always had a strange fascination with fire, and she would watch the flames for hours, watching strange figures dance about. And for King, the flames invoked a different perspective at the moment, and he imagined his home consumed by fire. And he focused specifically on the edge of the wood as it was slowly turned ashen to dust and to nothingness. And his brooding thoughts were interrupted by Garganta, who said, "Welcome, King." "I am the king of nothing," said Monkey King, still moody, and he repeated, "Nothing." "Monkey King, you Leviathan, gracious defeat, benevolent in victory, fed you, bathed you, raised you to be king. And now do your duty," said Garganta, standing before the flames facing her king, and she made a gracious low bow, and her supple green dress seemed to float with the flames behind her, and her green eyes too seemed to have a glow of their own, and coughing slightly, King forced himself out of his lethargy, and he had chosen to return to the continent along with most of the others, and Nalini was staying with the dragon riders for the moment, and Loki was busy traveling worlds looking for adventure, and Shikar returned to his own mercantilism empire with with Karina, and Shalom was with his father studying magic, and the other siblings were in the middle of making arrangements to stay in Saturnastra permanently. And then there was Ahi, who kept phasing in and out of their lives, and though through his anger he kept himself in contact with his close friends and family, and at times he was prone to disappear on them, and this was nothing new. And just in case Ahi felt like visiting, King had set up a bed of coins for his brother. King smiled sadly, looking at the empty pile of golden coins, and the two had been inseparable since birth, and the siblings were originally supposed to be 12. Instead 13 were born, and King had been born with the identical specs as Ahi, and they developed completely different from one another. And it was a wonder why he was so weak while his siblings had turned out so strong, even if they were identical right down to their DNA core. It's like, what happened? What, Because, like, King, he's like a small, puny little magic user, while his brother developed into a ginormous dragon. A dragon that's big enough to be called a space dragon, and he can travel through time and space, and do all of the fancy, smashy stuff. And whatever the plot requires him to do. Time, bro?
17 minutes.
The first sign of defeat became noted in a simple event, and the nameless child that later was crowned as the Monkey King used to close to Ahi whenever he slept, and Ahi one day pushed his brother away, feeling smothered. And at the time, King used to think that his brother was just being a little distant, and he was deeply hurt when he saw Ahi lying beside the dragons. And other instances of separation continued in the form of language and thought barriers, and eventually King became unable to communicate with his own brother. And he was becoming something strange, different from himself, and the final blow came the moment that King arrived to Saturnastra, and he had asked his brother to stay with him to help him on his task, and instead of fulfilling his desire, he disappeared on him to do literally anything else. And King remembered yelling, "Damn it, don't you leave me alone!" And after hours of being alone with the forest, he said to his brother, "Please come back, don't leave me alone, I'm nothing without you." And King had been truly hurt that his brother had abandoned him, or at least he fancied. If ever he was in any serious trouble, he would appear on him, but he had to be within an inch of his life for his twin Ahi to bother to lift a finger to help him. He was a quixotic child, and he had already decided on his name quite early, and the pity was that not even his brother had caught on. And even till this day, King did not have a true name, and he simply answered by the name King or Monkey King because this was what his peers called him. And he never considered himself either a monkey or a king for that matter. And he was soon picked up by the Nagas, who felt pity for the wailing, sobbing child, and without his brother, King used the Nagas as a crutches, and the Nagas too depended on King as well, since their instinct told him that this King had many qualities that they lacked, and the most important quality was knowledge. And without knowledge, intelligence is no different than a rusted knife. And the first thing King gave to the Nagas was a unified language, and a good portion of the Nagas still spoke in the same way as their ancestor. And it took more than 4 years, but eventually all of them spoke English. And like the feral dragons, they could understand human speech, but they had never bothered to try to learn it. And others like the macabres, the gorillas, and the bonobos already had something akin to human speech and writing, but they had never bothered to create a unified system. And it was not until King that they saw one another as a unified species, even though technically DNA-wise they were quite different from one another. And this gave them a natural horde advantage over their human cousins. And while the humans were always species fighting among themselves, the Naga horde was one unit. And rising from his lethargy, Monkey King asked, "What of the others?" "Scattered," said Gargantua, eating portions of her sentence. Chuckling, Monkey King said, "How very human of them, and I suppose I better round them up, lest infighting recommence." And Gargantua opened the window, and she started emitting a loud, guttural growl, and the sound was then echoed in the main Lusitania Peninsula that was just 2 miles away. And her ancestors had evolved from the ursine howler monkeys, which had been crossbred with the orangutans to give her a larger frame, intelligence, and lifespan. And as many crossbreeds with the other noteworthy species, the ursine Naga clan no longer had tails, and they stood upright like the human primates, and although the Nagas had a certain degree of what humans would call impurity, and humans and elves hated the mixing of races and of their blood, and they were under the foolish notion that crossbreeding ruined species. The Iranians considered that they both share one common ancestor, the noble Neanderthal. So both humans and elves are descendants of the Neanderthal. Time?
13 minutes.
And from the Neanderthals, humans and elves obtained their immune system, and before then a common cold was enough to lay them flat on the ground, and the concept of evolution and crossbreeding gave King plenty of food for thought, and as of late only the silver dragons were experimented with their pedigree, and the maiden silver dragons only mated with the strongest male dragon, and with their females, or high and mighty, the beta silver dragons were forced to find partners elsewhere. And King thought, just in this continent alone, more than 2,000 humans were related to a single dragon, and maybe we should try adding a bit of dragon to improve the Naga's pedigree. And recognizing their look, Garganta stopped her growling, and then she said, Naga's dog. You're right. I should not be thinking of my friends as mere animals. Like, what she meant is that we're not dogs, but she always eats like whole sentence, but she always eats like parts of her sentence, so she ate the not part. The whole, we are not dogs, you know? Because he was thinking about how to crossbreed like his own people in order to like make them stronger, and then we're like, no, we're not dogs. You crazy person. And you're right, I should not be thinking of my friends as mere animals, and at times it's best to just wait and see what occurs, though it would be nice to add a bit of dragons as they are wonderful creatures, said King, smiling. Rolling her eyes, Garganta continued with her growling, and Naga still did use traditional forms of communication, and even in the new human speech, they would at times return to old grounds to keep the humans in suspense. And this was another strategy devised by King, and he believed that the ape tongue was worth preserving. And aside from the speaking different dialects, King could understand animal speech, and this was not a trait of his kind, and language for King was second nature to him, and in this respect he was very much draconic like his twin brother. It close to midnight the howling and strange noises in the peninsula stopped, and the non-Nagas who lived in the area were all pensive, and the humans were expecting a Naga attack, and the Mu were roused from their sleep in order to check their livestock, and the Nagas were famous for being thieves, and they used to steal whatever food they could not find, and so had made attempts at the mercantilism like the bonobos. And its crew did not originally identify with their ancestral species. Rather, it was a classification created by King, based on the primate they most resemble. And in this respect, King was acting very human. And King never called them by their scientific names, and instead they were meant to know, so used to differentiate them among each other, and so like Garganta were a little less identifiable, considering that she had very human eyes. And King used to muse about Garganta's human eyes while she howled for the others to come, and they were human in so much as they worked under the reflection of the light, and unlike other apes, her eyes shine as red instead of green in the darkness. You know, like when you shine light in animals in the forest, their eyes flash back greens. But like when you use the flash in human eyes, it's red. So that's how he knows that she has like human-like eyes, because of that shine reflection that is red instead of green. Time, bro?
13 minutes.
Garganta suddenly stopped howling, and Monkey King got up and he gave her a glass of water, and sitting down beside him, King noted her relatively small frame, and he was barely over a meter tall, and even King was puny for his supposed age. His fragile frame and golden attire made him look even punier, and this contrasted with his magic staff, which was twice his height, and his tail was long and elegant, strong enough to support his own height. And as usual, he sported plenty of golden bangles and rings, even on his hand feet, and he was built like a 12-year-old human child, and his arms and legs were long, especially his delicate nimble fingers, and he had small pointed ears, large eyes, and small nose, and his hairy face was white, with a black mouth, and his overall coat was a mixture of gray and white and gold. And below the elbows and his knees, his fur turned completely golden, and his hair was long and jet black, and he always wore it in a single braid, and like his twin, his eyes were bright red. Johnny Gargantua commented, I was so till arrival, what do? I suppose it was so good at Amazonian to do civilization building, and before my prime concern was increasing our magic arsenal, and now we must reorganize to bring stability to our territory, said King getting up, and he rolled up a map and he studied it with Gargantua. And despite much past human incursion, the Lusitania Peninsula and the boreal forests of the southern coast belong to the Nagas, and the Nagas could technically make expansionism efforts since the southern towns of the Western Kingdom were in disarray. And King begrudged the idea of expanding the territory, and many human natures have fallen due to high ambitions. Still, if the territories wanted to join up, King would welcome them with open arms. Would open up the so-called higher apes, aka the humans. King discussed for an hour this and many other matters with Gargantua, and before the leader of the Nagas arrived, King had decided to follow Gargantua's advice. Now was not a good time to worry about expanding the territory. Plus, there were the alabaster dragons to consider. The Nagas shared boundary with them, and the dragons never bothered them, though they did attack human towns from time to time due to boundary issues. It was possible that making attempts to build too big of a civilization might incur their wrath. And before trying it, King planned to send emissaries to get their input on the matter. So, they gotta, ask their dragon cause, dude, are you gonna be super shield if I build a town, or will you just burn it to the ground? Or will that seriously annoy you enough to want to attack us? Which is something to consider if you had dragon neighbors. Close to midnight, while the Titan moon loomed over the apex of the tower, the first of the Nagas arrived, and this was the largest, most cosmopolitan group, and they were quite varied in their looks, and they were descendants of the lemurs of Madagascar. And like King, they were physically more akin to humans, and they no longer had feet. And they were the most intelligent and agile of the lot, though physically frail, and like their ancestors, they were resistant to changing climates, and they contrived in both heat and frost, and most of them were nocturnal, and as such they were the first to hear Gargantua's howling. And the leader of the group had large snow-white fur and black hands and feet, and aside from her enlarged blue eyes, her face was almost human, and while her companion camped below, she rose up to the tower to speak to the king. The king smiled, and he gave a low bow to greet her, and he could not help but recall her most recent ancestor, the Silkisifaka. And of course, this classification will mean nothing to her. The name of the maiden was Ida, and she did not acquire the name. Rather, it had been given to her by her former human master. And she was always touched whenever there was even mention of her life among humans. And in spite of everything, she did come back with useful skills like agriculture, tool making, and animal domestication. Ada told King, welcome back, my king. How fares your journey back home? What journey back home, said King, giving a bitter smile, and he was matching the brooding moodiness of his brother Marduke. Never mind, pray do tell, how long will you be staying, asked Ida. I will be staying indefinitely. It is not as if I have a place to go back to anymore, said King, petting the left side of his neck, and for reason he imagined he felt stiff, and he also felt like he was having a hard time breathing, and to make certain he got enough oxygen, he would take in deep breaths from time to time, and the others were already used to his eccentricity. As such, they completely ignored his turmoil. He went back home and then he just found nothing. Nothing as in, the planet's gone. Poof! You can't one thing is you go back and your house is missing. Another thing is that you go back and you find that the whole planet is missing. After she heard this, Ada said in an unconvincing show of sympathy, I am sorry to hear that, my king. Time?
4 minutes.
She made a motion to pat his head the same way one would do to a child, but her hand stopped in mid-motion, and she remembered that King hated being treated like a little kid. Then whenever he was sulky, he tended to inspire Ida's maternal instinct. And much to his chagrin, King had noticed the motion, and his friendly tone became cold for the duration of their conversation. Ida briefed him on the situation of the neighboring lands and the growth of their people, and Ida's lemurs had ascribed to themselves an extremely boring responsibility. And during her time with the humans, she came across something called a census, and it was done by the birds and meadows at least once a decade, and Ida's group had recently done one in mimicry of the humans. Right now, our armies are a total of 40,000 strong, And this is taking in stock everyone who can fight, either in a battle or through guerrilla warfare and other stealth tactics.
Monkey King doing gorilla.
Guerrilla warfare. Gorilla. It's a guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare. The standing army is the traditional warring training numbers is 12,000, and the rest are auxiliary forces with a variety of training, explained Ida. So only the provisional army I created is still intact, said King, disappointed. And I was expecting things to get better in my absence. No offense, my king, but you cannot expect such much improvement over the course of 4 years, complained Ida. We humans, commented Gargantua. And she had just returned from tidying among King's room, and he had not noticed when she made her exit, and she had an eye for being as noiseless as a grave when there was important information to be discussed. And by reducing the noise, she admitted she could hear the conversation from even the bottom of the tower. What? Said Ida, confused. She means we are not human. True humans have a talent for warfare, and during a critical point of their history, they made great advances in less than 4 years. And I'm not begrudging you either. Frankly, I was hoping that my army alone would have been enough to keep the humans at bay, said King sadly. They know, commented Gargantua. How do they not know? Asked King alarmed. Beats me. The knowledge of the forest is too localized, and only humans living at the borderlands for the past generations would understand the dangers of traveling the jungles of Lusitania. And it is no coincidence that we try while they perish, said Ada more to herself. And the conversation was interrupted when more than leaders started to arrive, and for many hours they conversed. However, the matter of civilization building was put on hold when a messenger arrived carrying a mysterious letter. And even after King made plenty of efforts in making the Nagas literate, there were 60% of them who did not know how to read or write. And as such, the Nagas still use traditional methods of communication across long distances, and this letter had been passed by a human addressed to the Monkey King of all people. A smiling King said, Well, this is unexpected. I just get here and I already received my first diplomatic letter from the humans. How do you know that it comes from someone of importance, Ida? Raising the letter, King said, The wax seal has a stamp, and there is the flowery cursive. Only nobles employ this type of fancy calligraphy, and since the poor may try to imitate it, however, perfection has been whipped into the hand of our writer. King looked at the date of the letter and he frowned, and after seeing his folded arms, Gargantua then said, 25. How did you come upon this letter? Asked King to Pierre. Pierre was a representative and the descendant of the gibbons and the orangutans, and his grandmother ran most of the show, and Pierre was of the physical manifestation of their evolutionary past, and from the orangutans they had inherited their size, hands, and dimorphism, and the males tended to be larger and stronger, and Pierre even sported a silly mustache thanks to that side of the family, and he also had their intelligence refined for many generations, and they also took longer to reach adulthood, even more so than human children. They take about 30 years, and from the gibbons they had acquired their social skills and overly long limbs, and they had also wide varieties of furs and colors, and like the rest of the Nagas, Pierre walked on 2 legs. As a whole, Pierre's family was known to have magical properties, and some could even tap into the power of the faith, already had rudimentary astrology before meeting King. Time?
Less than 5 seconds.